My girlfriend faked an accident and lied about a huge hospital bill to guilt me into draining my savings to help her. Later, I found out it was her gambling debts. So I pressed charges and dumped her. I'm a 29-year-old guy, and if you'd asked me 6 months ago, I would have told you my girlfriend was the best thing that ever happened to me. She was bright, fun, and always seemed to care about our future together, or so I believed. We've been dating for about a year, growing closer each month, and I started picturing a life where we'd eventually settle down. She moved in with me after about 8 months of dating. We adapted to sharing space, though I started noticing small red flags. She'd frequently be out late, sometimes come home with odd excuses, like meeting a friend who never seemed to have a name. Or she'd rummage through my drawers, claiming she needed spare change. There were also times she'd bring up financial woes, hinting she was short on rent money or needed help with random debts, but I shrugged them off. We weren't married, so I figured her finances were her own business. Still, I'd cover a few dinners or groceries, not minding the extra cost. She always appeared grateful, promising me she'd repay my kindness eventually. I never suspected anything sinister. One random Tuesday, she called me in tears. I just clocked out of work, preparing to head home. The panic in her voice made my heart skip. She gasped, "I'm at the hospital. I got into a bad accident." My stomach lurched. I asked if she was okay, if she needed me to come pick her up. She sobbed about being badly hurt, that her car was totaled, and medical bills were piling up already. "They won't release me unless I pay part of it," she insisted, claiming the hospital's policy required an upfront portion of fees, or she'd be stuck with extra charges. Alarmed, I told her to hang in there and that I'd be on my way. She insisted there was no point, she'd soon be discharged, but that she desperately needed help paying the bill. It was a shocking amount. My mind reeled. I asked if insurance wouldn't cover most of it. She said something about her insurance lapsing, that she'd missed a payment. She apologized profusely, explaining she'd messed up with some personal finances. My protective instincts flared. My girlfriend was in pain, stuck in a medical crisis, so of course I wanted to help. We arranged for me to wire a chunk of money, nearly all of my savings, to an account she claimed belonged to the hospital's payment department. She texted me some official-sounding details. At the time, it all felt real. I was numb with worry, imagining her lying in a hospital bed, possibly with fractures or worse. I told her not to worry about money, that we'd figure out the rest later. She thanked me tearfully, ending the call, promising we'd talk once she was out of the hospital. For the entire evening, my stomach was in knots. I couldn't even eat. I just waited and waited for an update. Around midnight, she texted me that she was home resting at a friend's place because she didn't want me to see her bruised and bandaged. Her messages were short, as if she was heavily sedated. I tried calling. No response. I told myself it made sense. Maybe she was too exhausted. Over the next few days, I still didn't see her in person. She claimed she was laid up with injuries, needing constant rest, and that her friend, the same unnamed friend, was taking care of her. She said she felt guilty burdening me. The sweet tone of her messages reassured me that she appreciated my help. But as the days dragged on, I grew anxious. Why wouldn't she let me visit? She gave excuses like, "I look awful, I don't want you to see me this way," or "the doctor said I shouldn't move much." Then she asked for even more money, follow-up treatments, new medication, physical therapy sessions that allegedly weren't covered by insurance. By then, I'd nearly drained my emergency fund. I was forced to tell her I couldn't conjure more cash. She seemed to accept that, though her texts turned a tad cold. Then she abruptly announced she'd be coming back to our place after all, wanting to rest in her own bed. I prepared the apartment, cleared the living room, set up a comfy space in case she needed it. My concern overshadowed everything else. But when she walked through the door, I expected crutches, maybe a brace, or at least visible bruises. Instead, she strolled in almost normally. There was a faint limp, but no bandages, no plaster cast. She claimed the hospital gave her top-notch care, so she was healing fast. She wore loose clothing, said she had soreness, but overall seemed suspiciously okay for someone who had described a near-fatal accident. I asked if she had any paperwork from the hospital, like discharge forms or medication receipts, so I could help keep track. She said she threw them away, not wanting painful reminders. Something about that stunk. But I tried not to question her too hard. Maybe she was traumatized. Maybe she was proud or ashamed of needing help. I told myself to be patient. Yet the nagging feeling wouldn't leave. I decided to do something I'd never done before, check her phone bills. I was paying the monthly phone plan for both of us. Late one night, I discovered suspicious charges. A bunch of calls and texts to some gambling hotline. My heart thudded. Could it be that she gambled? I also saw multiple wire transfers in her bank statement. She'd used my laptop once, forgetting to log out. They weren't going to any hospital. They were going to an online betting site I recognized. My blood ran cold. The next morning, I gently tried to probe the topic of her hospital stay. She got defensive fast, snapping that I was prying and that I shouldn't question her ordeal. She insisted the hospital had destroyed all her records due to privacy. That was ridiculous. No hospital destroys records days after a patient's discharge. My suspicion grew like a wildfire. Finally, I confronted her outright. Did you really get into an accident, or are you lying to me? She stormed off, hurling curses that I was accusing her of terrible things. Do you think I'm a monster who'd fake an accident? Her theatrics only fueled my doubts. That evening, my frustration reached a boiling point. I decided to do some investigative work. First, I called a couple of local hospitals, describing the supposed date of her admission, her name, and asking if she'd been a patient. Both hospitals came up empty. One politely explained that no one matching her name or birth date had been admitted in the past week. The second confirmed the same. My stomach churned. This was definitive proof something was off. Next, I rummaged through the trash at home, partly out of desperation. If she really had discharge papers, medication info, anything, maybe I'd find a clue. I found nothing but normal junk mail. No medical forms, no prescription receipts, nothing. By the time I finished, I was furious, my mind spinning with the realization that I'd probably been scammed by someone I loved. When she got home that night from a supposed checkup, I calmly sat her down. Which hospital did you go to? I asked. She paused, her eyes flicking around, then spat out a random name. I told her I'd called them, and they had no record of her. She froze, face going pale. She tried to cover, claiming they had her under a different name due to insurance issues. It sounded ridiculous. I confronted her with the phone records showing calls to gambling hotlines, the suspicious bank statements. That's when the facade cracked. She started sobbing, claiming she had a secret addiction, that she couldn't control it, and that she really did have medical bills from the stress or something equally vague. Her story changed every minute. I pressed her for a simple yes or no. Was the accident real? She finally broke down, admitting it was fake. She'd orchestrated the entire story, hoping to get money from me to cover her mounting gambling debts. My emotions swung from betrayal to fury. You made me think you were lying half dead in a hospital. You drained my savings. She tried to cling to me, bawling that she was desperate, that she needed help, that she still loved me. But all I could see were dollar signs she'd stolen from me with her tearful phone calls, manipulations, and bogus hospital tale. You're telling me you never even went to the hospital? I asked again. She nodded, trembling. It was the rawest heartbreak I've ever felt. On the one hand, I pitied her addiction, if it was even real. On the other, I was seething at how she'd exploited my trust and emotional investment. I demanded she give me back the money. She pleaded that she didn't have it anymore, that the gambling side had bled her dry, and she owed more to some unsavory bookies. My heart hammered. This wasn't just a personal betrayal. It was dangerous territory. I told her to leave, to pack her things. I couldn't even look at her. She refused, whining she had nowhere to go. I threatened to call the police if she didn't get out. She hissed that I was overreacting, that couples should work through issues. This isn't some small issue, I snapped. You committed fraud. You scammed me. She left in a rage, taking a duffel bag of clothes, slamming the door behind her, shouting that I'd regret casting her out. In the quiet aftermath, I surveyed the damage. My savings account was wiped out. I worried about rent bills. I realized I might not recover the money just by scolding her. She'd likely keep gambling or vanish. So after a sleepless night of churning thoughts, I decided to take the legal route. I wasn't sure how strong my case would be. She was my girlfriend, after all, and some might say I willingly gave her the money. But the fact that she lied about hospital bill and used deception might be enough to press charges. I gathered every piece of evidence: text conversations where she detailed her supposed injuries, the bank transfers labeled hospital payment, and the phone call logs to the gambling hotline. Then I visited the local police station, carefully explaining that I'd been defrauded. The officer listened patiently, asked clarifying questions, and took my statement. They said the case could be categorized under theft by deception or fraud, depending on the district attorney's take. I remember trembling as I told him the story. It was surreal. The officer asked if I confronted her or had any admissions. I recounted how she'd effectively confessed after I cornered her. He asked if I had a recording or text confirming her admission. I shook my head, feeling foolish for not thinking to record it. But I had enough circumstantial evidence, plus witnesses like my friend who saw me in a panic, the hospitals that had no record of her, that might build a case. A few days later, I got a call from a detective assigned to investigate. He verified some details, asked for any bank statements. I handed over copies. We filed an official complaint. Then it was a waiting game. Meanwhile, I found out from a mutual acquaintance that my ex-girlfriend was telling people I'd lost it and was trying to ruin her life because she broke up with me. She insisted she'd never asked me for money, that I gave it voluntarily out of obsession. That turned my anger into resolve. If she was going to lie publicly, then I had no qualms about letting the legal system handle it. My biggest worry was that the police might not prioritize the case, or they might see it as a domestic issue. But surprisingly, they seemed to take it seriously, especially after confirming no hospital records existed to back her claim. The detective indicated that once they had enough evidence, they could approach her for questioning. If she refused to cooperate, they could forward charges to the district attorney's office. In the meantime, I was left picking up the pieces financially. My boss allowed me to pick up extra shifts, and a few friends pitched in small loans so I could cover rent for the month. The betrayal weighed on me like a stone around my neck. I confided in her, letting her into my life, only to discover she saw me as nothing but a source of quick cash. It battered my trust in relationships. But I told myself it was better to learn this now than to remain in denial while she drained me further. Eventually, the detective got back in touch. They'd located her living at a friend's place. She'd apparently tried to evade them, but once cornered, she insisted she never coerced me into anything. She downplayed the story about a hospital as a miscommunication. The detective, however, had the text messages where she vividly described the accident, how she was lying in a hospital bed, the inflated bills, even the bit about needing immediate payment. According to him, her face paled when she realized they had those messages. The case proceeded slowly, as legal matters often do. She was charged with fraud. Her reaction was explosive. She messaged me, raging that I was a monster who couldn't just let things go, that I was ruining her future. She tried to flip the script, claiming she had emotional problems, that she was addicted to gambling because of some childhood trauma. I wasn't blind to the possibility she needed help, but it didn't erase the fact she'd faked a hospital crisis to scam me out of thousands. In the eyes of the law, that was a crime. I blocked her number. The court date loomed. Meanwhile, friends offered emotional support. Some urged me to see a counselor to process the betrayal. I booked a few therapy sessions, which helped me understand that I wasn't at fault for trusting someone I loved. The blame lay in her manipulations and entitlements. The counselor also reminded me that pressing charges didn't make me cruel. It set a boundary against someone who'd used me. Finally, we had a hearing. She arrived, looking haggard, accompanied by a lawyer. I watched from across the room, heart pounding. The prosecution laid out the evidence: her fabricated text, the non-existent hospital records, the wire transfers that matched her gambling deposits. Her defense lawyer tried to spin it as a misunderstanding, claiming she never forced me to pay, that she'd intended to reimburse me, and that her addiction clouded her judgment. But the judge seemed unimpressed, especially with how meticulously she orchestrated the accident lie. They decided there was enough to proceed with the trial if it came to that, or she could negotiate a plea deal. In the end, she took a plea to avoid a drawn-out trial. She admitted guilt, faced a probation period, and was mandated to pay restitution. The restitution part was a relief, though I doubted she'd pay it back any time soon. Still, it was a moral victory to see her face the consequences. The judge also suggested she enter a rehab program for gambling addiction, which I fully supported, if only so she might not do this to someone else. I parted ways from the courthouse that day, feeling a mix of sadness and triumph. Sadness because it was a relationship that had once meant something to me, now culminating in a legal proceeding. Triumph because I refused to let her get away with such cruelty. I recognized that my trust and generosity had been weaponized against me, but I'd also proven I wouldn't roll over and let it slide.